mind dream, and hallucination. All human thoughts, all mental man's experience moves between a constant affirmation and negation. And therefore is man no truth of idea, no result of experience that cannot be affirmed, none that cannot be negated. It has negated the existence of the individual being, negated the existence of the cosmos, negated the existence of any immanent or underlying reality, and negated any reality beyond the individual and the cosmos, but it is also constantly affirming these things, as sometimes one of them solely or any two or all of them together. It has to do so because our thinking mind is in its very nature an ignorant dealer in possibilities, not possessing the truth behind any of them, but sounding and testing each in turn, or many together, if so perchance it may get at some settled belief or knowledge about them, some certitude. Yet living in a world of relativities and possibilities, it can arrive at no final certainty, no absolute and abiding conviction about the actual, the realized can present itself to our mentality as a may or may not be. See or not yet, or as that is, and the shade of the might not have been unwearing the aspect of that, which will not be hereafter. Our life being is also afflicted by the same insanity. It can rest in no aim of living from which it can derive a sure or final satisfaction, or which it can assign an enduring value. Our nature steals from facts and actualities which it takes for real. It is pushed beyond them into a pursuit of uncertain possibilities. Uncertain possibilities and led eventually to question all that it took for as real. For it proceeds from a fundamental ignorance and has no hold on assured truths. All the truths on which it relies for a time are found to be partial. Partial, incomplete, and questionable. At the outset, man lives in his physical mind, which perceives the actual physical objective and accepts it as a fact, and this fact as the self-evident truth beyond question. Whatever is not actual, not physical, not objective, it regards as unreal or unreal, as long to be accepted as entirely real when it has succeeded in becoming actual, or becoming a physical fact, becoming objective, what's on going into it regards as an objective fact, or wanted to be real by its existence in a visible and sensible body, all other subjective beings and things it accepts as the same evidence insofar as they can become objects of our external consciousness, or acceptable to that part of the reason which builds upon the data supplied by that consciousness and relies upon them as one solid basis of knowledge. Of physical science is a vast expansion of this mentality. It corrects the errors of the sense and pushes beyond the first limitations of the sense mind by discovering means of bringing facts on object not seizable by our corporeal organs to the field of objectivity, but adds the same standard of reality of objective, the physical physical fact becoming objective, zone being to it as an objective fact, warranted to be real by its existence is visible and sensible body, all other subjective beings and things it accepts on the same evidence, and so far as they can become objects of our external consciousness are acceptable to that part of the reason which builds upon the data supplied by that consciousness and relies upon them as one solid base of knowledge. Physical science is a vast extension of that mentality. It corrects the errors of the sense and pushes beyond the first limitations of the sense mind by discovering means of bringing facts on objects not seizable by our corporeal organs to the field of objectivity. But it has the same standard of reality, the objective, the physical actuality. Its tests Its test of the real is possibility of verification by positive reason and objective evidence, but man is also as a life mind, a vital mentality which is an instrument of desire. There is no satisfaction that actually it is a dealer in possibility. It has the passion for novelty and is seeking always to extend the limits of experience for the satisfaction of desire or enjoyment for an enlarged self-affirmation and acknowledgement of its terrain of power and profit. It desires enjoys possesses actualities, but it turns after also after unrealized possibilities. It is ordered to materialize them to possess and enjoy them also. It is not satisfied with the physical and objective only, but seeks to a subjective and imaginative, purely emotive satisfaction and pleasure. If there were not this factor, the physical mind of man left itself would live like the animal, accepting its first actual physical life and its limits as its whole possibility, moving in material nature's established order and asking for nothing beyond it. But this vital man is unique Unquiet life will comes in with its demands and disturbs this inverter road insatisfaction which leaves man within the bounds of actuality. Enlarges always the desire and craving, creates a dissatisfaction and rest of seeking for something more than what life has seems able to give it. It brings about a vast enlargement of the field of physical actuality by the actualization of an unrealized possibility, but also a constant demand for more and always more. A quest for new also conquer an incessant drive towards an exceeding of the bounds of circumstance and self-exceeding. To add to this cause of understanding, certainly that comes in thinking mind that inquires into everything, questions everything, builds up affirmations and builds them erect systems of certitude, but finally accepts none of them as certain. Affirms and questions the evidence of the senses, follows out the conclusion of the reason, but does not and does again to arrive at the different or quite the opposite conclusions and continues indefinitely, if not ad infinitum. This process is the history of human thought and human endeavor, a constant breaking of bounds only to move always in the same spirals, enlarged perhaps but following the same of or constantly similar curves of direction. The mind of humanity ever seeking in a ever active never arrives at a firmly settled reality of life aims and objects or at a settled reality of its own certitudes and convictions, and established foundations or firm formation of its idea of existence, or its remembered of this constant unrest and retrieval, even the physical mind or discern part of this constant analysis and travel, even the physical mind loses conviction of object to certain awareness and acknowledgement which questions all its own standards of life and knowledge, knows whether all this is real or else, whether all, even if real, is not futile. The vital mind, baffled by life and frustrated or else satisfied with all its satisfactions, ordered by deep holding it by deep disgust and disappointment, finds that all is vanity and vexation of spirit and is ready to reject life and existence and unreality. All that is standard after its illusion, Maya, the thinking mind, unbreeding all its affirmation, discovers that all are mere mental construction. There is no reality in the morals, the only reality is something beyond this existence, something that has not made or constructed something absolute and eternal. All that is relative, all that is of time is a dream, a hallucination of the mind, or a vast delirium, or human's cosmic illusion, a delusive figure of apparent existence. The principle of negation prevails over the principle of affirmation becomes universal and absolute. Thence arise the great world and negating religions and philosophies, thence to a recall of the life motive from itself and its seeking after its life elsewhere, or flawless and eternal, or a will to annihilate life itself in an immobile reality or an original non-existence. In India, the philosophy of the world negation has been given the formulation of the supreme power and the value of the two of the greatest overthinkers, Buddha and Shankara. There have been intermediate or later in time the other philosophies of considerable importance, some of them are widely accepted and formulated with much acumen of thought of by men of genius and spiritual insight, which disputed with more or less force and success the conclusions of these two great metaphysical systems. But none of them has been put forward with an equal force of representation of or drive of personality or having similar and massive effects. The spirit of these two remarkable spiritual philosophies. For Shankara, the historical process of India's philosophical mind takes up, completes and replaces Buddha, as vying with a tremendous power on her thoughts, religions, and German everywhere broods its mighty shadow. Everywhere is the impress of the three great formulas. The chain of karma escapes from the wheel of rebirth, Maya. It is necessary therefore to look at the several idea of the truth behind the negation of the cosmic history and to consider, however briefly, what is the value of its main formulation or suggestion and what reality they stand, how far they are imperative to the reason or the experience. For the present, it will be enough to throw a regard of the principle of the ideas which are grouped around the conception of the great cosmic illusion Maya and set against those that are proper to our own line of thought and vision. For both processes proceed from the conception of the one reality. One line leads to the universal illusion and the other to universal realism, the unreal or real unreal universe reposing on a transcendent reality or a real universe reposing on a reality, advanced universal and transcendent absolute. In itself and by itself, the being's aversion. The life man's recall from the life cannot be taken as valid or conclusive. Its strongest motive is a sense of disappointment and an acceptance of frustration, which has no greater claim to conclusiveness than the idealist opposite motive of the invariable hope and his faith or will to realize. And nevertheless, there is a certain variety in the mental robot of the sense of frustration in the perception at which the thinking mind arrives that there is an illusion behind all human effort and terrestrial endeavor. The illusion of his morality and social gospel, the illusion of his ethical effects and perfection, the illusion of philanthropy and service, the illusion of works, the illusion of fame, power, success, the illusion of all achievement. Our social political endeavor returns away in a circle, or turns always in a circle and leads nowhere. Man's life and nature remain always the same, always imperfect. And neither laws, nor institution, nor education, nor philosophy, nor morality, nor religious teachings have succeeded in producing the perfect man, still less a perfect humanity. Straight at the tail of a dog, as you will, it has been said, it has always resumes its proper natural curve of crookedness, altruism, philanthropy, and service. Christian love or Buddhist compassion have not made the world a bit happier. They only give infinitesimal bits of momentary relief here and there, throw drops of the fire of the world suffering. All aims are in the end transitory, infidel, all achievements unsatisfying or evanescent. All works are so much labor of effort and success and failure, which consummate nothing definitely. Whatever changes are made in a human life are in the form of only, and these forms pursue each other in a feudal cycle. For the essence of life, its general character remains the same forever. This view of things may be exaggerated, but it's not it's an undeniable force. It is supported by the experience of man's century, and it carries in itself a significance which at one time or another comes upon the mind with an overwhelming air of self-evidence. Not only so, but it is true that the fundamental laws and values of terrestrial existence are fixed, or that it must always turn in repeated circles, and this has been for long a very prevalent notion. Then this view of things in the end is wholly escapable, for imperfection, ignorance, frustration, suffering are a dominant factor of the existing world order. The elements contrary of knowledge, happiness, success, perfection are constantly found to be deceptive or inclusive. Of the two opposites also inextricably linked, that if this state of things is not a motion towards a greater fulfillment, if this is the permanent character of the world order, then it is ought to avoid the conclusion that all here is either the creation of an inconscient energy, which should account for the incapacity of an apparent consciousness to arrive at anything, or intentionally a world of ordeal and failure. The issue of being here, not here, but elsewhere, or even a vast and aimless cosmic illusion. Among these already conclusions, the second, as it is usually put before us, offers no ground for the philosophical reason, since we have no satisfying indication of the connection between the here and the elsewhere, which are posited against each other but not explaining the inevitability of their relations, and there is no light cast on the necessary or fundamental significance of the ordeal and failure. It would only be intelligible except as the mysterious will of an arbitrary creator. How there was a choice by immortal spirits to try the adventure of the ignorance and necessary for them to learn the nature of a world of ignorance in order that they might reject it, but such a creative motive, necessary, incidental, contemporary in its incidents with the earth as its casual field of experience could only by itself account for the immense and enduring phenomenon of this complex universe. It can become an operative part of the satisfactory explanation of this world as the field of the field for the working out of a greater creative motive. If it is a manifestation of a divine truth or a divine possibility in which under certain conditions and initiating ignorance must intervene as a necessary factor, and its arrangement of this universe contains in it a compulsion of the ignorance to move towards knowledge of the imperfect manifestation to grow into perfection of the frustration to serve as steps towards the final victory of the suffering to prepare an emergence of the divine delight of being. In that case, the sense of disappointment, frustration, illusion, or vanity of all things would not be valid. For the aspects that seem to justify it would be only the natural circumstances of a difficult evolution. All the stress of struggle and effort, success and failure, joy and suffering, the mixture of ignorance and knowledge would be the experience needed for the soul, mind, life, and physical part to grow into the full light of a spiritual, perfected being. It would reveal itself as the process of an evolutionary manifestation. There would be no need to bring in the fear of an arbitrary omnipotence or a cosmic illusion, a fantasy of meaningless Maya. But there is too a higher mental and spiritual basis for the philosophy of the world negation. And here we are on the more solid ground, for it can be concluded that the world is in its very nature an illusion, and no reasoning from the futures and circumstances of illusion could justify it or to rise it into a reality. There is only one reality, the transcendent, the supracosmic, no divine fulfillment. Even if our life had to grow into the life of God, would nullify or cancel out the original unreality which is its fundamental character. For that fulfillment would be only the bright side of an illusion, or even if not absolutely an illusion, it would be a reality of an inferior order and must come to an end by the soul's recognition that the Brahman alone is true and that there is nothing but the transcendent and immutable absolute. If this is the one truth, then all ground is cut away from our feet. The divine manifestation, the victory of the soul in matter, its mastery over existence, the divine life in nature would itself be a falsehood, or at least a something not altogether real imposed for a time on the soul true reality. But here all turns on the mind's conception of the mental being's experience of reality, and how far that conception is valid or how far that experience is liberated. Even if it is a spiritual experience, how far it is absolutely conclusive, solely imperative. The cosmic illusion is sometimes envisaged, though that is not the accepted position, as something that has character of an unreal subjective experience. It is then, or maybe, a figure of forms and movements that arises in some eternal sleep of things or in a dream consciousness and is temporarily imposed on a pure and futureless self-aware existence. Is the dream that takes place in the infinite, in the philosophies of the Mayavadins. For there are several systems alike in their basis, but not altogether at every point consonant with each other. The analogy of a dream is given but as an analogy only, and not as an intrinsic character of the world illusion. It is difficult for the positive physical mind to admit the idea that ours of the world and life are sole thing to which our consciousness bears positive witness or inexistent. A theory possessed by that consciousness. And analogies are brought forward. The analogy is a of dream and hallucination in order to show that it's possible for the experience of the consciousness to seem to it real and yet prove to be without any basis or without a sufficient basis in reality. As a dream is real to the dreamer so long as he sleeps, but waking shows it to be unreal, so our experience of the world seems to us positive and real. But when we stand back from the illusion, we shall find that it had no reality. But it may be as well to give the dream analogy its full value and see whether our sense of world experience has in any way a similar basis. For the idea of the world as a dream, or whether it be a dream of the subjective mind or a dream of the soul or a dream of the eternal, is often entertained and is powerfully enforces the illusionist tendencies. on human feeling and thinking. It has, if it has no validity, we must definitely see that the reason of its inapplicability and studies aside well out of the way. If it has some validity, we must see that what it is and how far it goes. If the world is an illusion but not a dream illusion, that distinction too must be put on its psyche basis. A dream is felt to be unreal fast because it ceases that has no further validity when it passes from one status of consciousness to another, which is our normal status. But this is not by itself a sufficient reason, for it may well be that there was different states of consciousness, each with its own realities. If the consciousness of one state of things fades back into and its contents are lost, even when caught, its memories seem to be illusory. As soon as we pass into another state, that would be perfectly normal. But it would not prove the reality of the state in which we are now and the unreality of the other which we have left behind us. If the earth's circumstances begin to seem unreal to a soul passing into the different world or another plane of consciousness, that would not prove this their unreality. Similarly, the fact that the world exists and seems unreal to us when we pass into the spiritual silence or into some nirvana, it does not of itself prove that the contact was cosmos was all the time an illusion. The world is real to the consciousness dwelling in it, and unconditioned existence is real to the consciousness observed in nirvana. That is all that is established. But the second reason for refusing credit to sleep experiences that a dream is something evanescent without antecedents and without its sequel. Ordinarily, too, it is without any sufficient coherence or any significant intelligible to our waking being. If our dreams were like our waking life, an aspect of coherence, each night taking up and carrying further a past continuous and connected sleep experience, as each day takes up again another waking world experience, that dream should assume to our mind quite another character. There is therefore no analogy between a dream and a waking life. There are experiences quite different in the character validity order. Our life is accused of evanescence, and often it is accused to as a whole or a lack of inner coherence or significance. But its lack of complete significance may be due to our lack of limitation of understanding. Actually, when we go within and begin to see it from within, it assumes a complete connected significance. At the same time, whatever lack of inner coherence was felt before it disappears, and we see that it was due to the incoherence of our own inner being, seeing and knowledge, and was not at all a character of life. There is no surface incoherence in life. It rather appears to our minds as a chain of sequences, and if that is a mental delusion, as is sometimes alleged, if the sequence is created by our mind and does not actually exist in life, and that does not remove the difference of their true states of consciousness. For entering the coherence given by an observing inner consciousness adds in whatever sense of sequence, there it seems to be due to a vague and false imitation of the connections of waking life. A conscious mimesis, but this imitative sequence is shadowy, imperfect, fails and breaks always and is often wholly absent. We see too that the dream consciousness seems to be wholly devoid of that control which the waking consciousness exercises to some extent over life circumstances. It has the natural automatism of its subconscious construction, nothing of the conscious will and organizing force of the evolved mind of the human being. Again, the evanescence of a dream is radical, and one's dream has no connection with another. But the evanescence of waking life is of details. There is no evidence of evanescence in the connected totality of the world experience. Our bodies perish, but souls proceed from birth to birth through the ages. Stars and planets may disappear after the lapse of eons or of a many light years, but universe cosmic existence may well be a permanent, as it's certainly a continuous activity. There is nothing to prove that the infinite energy which creates it has an end or a beginning, or either of itself or of its actions. So far, there is too great a disappearance. Disparateness between dream life and waking life make the analogy applicable, but it may be questioned whether our dreams are indeed totally unreal and without significance, whether they are not a figure or an image, a record or a symbolic transcript or a representation of things that are real. For that, we have to examine. However, summarily, the nature of sleep and of dream phenomena, the process of origination and the provenance. What happens in sleep is that our consciousness withdraws from the field of this waking experience. It is supposed to be resting, suspended, or in abeyance, but that is a superficial view of the matter. What is in abeyance is the waking activities. What is at rest is the surface mind and the normal conscious action of the bodily part of us. But the inner conscious is not suspended. It enters into new inner activities, only a part of which a part happening or recorded in something of us that is near to the surface we remember. And that is the maintained in sleep. Thus, near the surface, an obscure or subconscious element which is receptacle or passage for our dream experience itself also a dream builder, but behind it is the depth and mass of the subliminal, the totality of a concealed inner being and consciousness, which is of quite another order. Normally, it is a subconscious part in us, intermediate between the consciousness and pure inconscious, that sends up through the surface layers, formations in the shape of dreams, constructions marked by an apparent inconsequence and incoherence. Many of these are physiologic structures built upon circumstances of our present life, selected apparently at random and surrounded with this fantasy of variation. Others call back in the past, or rather the selected circumstance persons of the past as a starting point for similar fleeting epiphanies. Or there are other dreams of the subconscious which seem to be pure fantasy without any such initiation or basis. But the new method of psychoanalysis is trying to look for the first time into our dreams with some kind of scientific understanding, as established in them a system of meaning, the key of things to in us which need to be known and handled by the waking conscious. This is of itself changes the whole character and value of a dream experience. It begins to look as if there was something real behind it, and as if too that something were an element of no mean practical importance. But the subconscious is not our sole dream builder. The subconscious in us is the extreme border of our secret inner existence, which where it meets the inconscient. It is a degree of our being in which the inconscient struggles into a half consciousness. The surface physical consciousness also. One it sinks back from the waking level and retrogresses towards the inconscient. It retires into this intermediate subconscious, or from another viewpoint, this neither part of us may be described as the antechamber of the inconscient through which its formations rise into our waking or our subliminal being. When we sleep on the surface physical part of us, which is its first origin here and output from the inconscient, relapses towards the originating inconscience. It enters into the subconscious element, antechamber or the substratum, and there it finds the impression of its past or persistent habits of mind and experience. For all, I have left them on our subconscious part and have there a power of recurrence. In its effect on our waking self, this recurrence often takes the form of a reassertion of old habits, impulses, dormant or suppressed, rejected elements of the nature, or it comes up as some other not so easily recognizable, some peculiar, discrete or subtle result of the suppressed or rejected but not erased impulses or elements. In the dream consciousness, the phenomenon is an apparently fanciful construction, a composite of figures and movements built upon around the buried impression with a sense in them that escapes the waking intelligence because it has no clue to the subconscious system of significances. After a time, the subconscious activity appears to sink back into complete unconscious, and we speak of this state as deep dreamless sleep. Thence we emerge again into the dream shallows or return to the waking surface. But in fact, in what we call dreamless sleep, we have gone into a profounder and denser layer of the subconscious, a state too involved, too immersed, or too obscure, dull and heavy to bring to the surface its structures. And we are dreaming there but unable to grasp or retain in the recording layer of the subconscious their more obscure dream figures. Or else, it may be the part of our mind which still remains active in the sleep of the body has entered into the inner domains of our being, the subliminal mental, the subliminal vital, the subtle physical, and is there lost to all active connection with the surface part of us. If we are still in the nearer depths of this region, the surface subconscious, which is our sleep wakefulness, records something of what we experience in their depths, but it records it in its own transcription, often marked by characteristic incoherences and always, even when most coherent, deformed or cast into figures drawn from the world of waking experience. But if we have gone deeper inward, the record fails or cannot be recovered, and we have the illusion of dreamlessness. But the activity of the inner dream consciousness continues behind the veil of now mute and inactive subconscious surface. This continued dream activity is revealed to us when we become more inwardly conscious, for then we get into a connection with the higher and deeper subconscious stratum and can be aware at the time or by retracing or recovering through memory of what happened when we sank into this torpid depths. It is possible to become conscious deeper within our subliminal selves, and we are then aware of the experiences on other planes of our being or even in a supraphysical world to which we give sleep, to which sleep gives us this right of secret entry. A transcript of such reaches us, but the transcriber here is not the subconscious, it is subliminal, a greater dream builder. If the subliminal thus comes to the front in our dream consciousness, there is sometimes an activity of our subliminal intelligence. The dream becomes a series of thoughts, often strangely or vividly figured, problems of soul which our waking consciousness could not solve, or warnings, premonitions, indications of the future. The radical dreams replace the normal subconscious incoherence. There can come also structure of symbol images, some of the mental characters, some of a wild creature. The former are precisely the figures, clear in their significance. The latter are often complex and baffling to our waking consciousness back. If we can seize the clue, they reveal their own sense and peculiar system of power, and finally they can come towards the records of happening seen or experienced by us on other planes of our own being or of a universal being into which we enter. These have content like the symbolic dreams, a strong bearing on our own inner and outer life or life of the others, reveal elements of their mental being and life being, or disclose influences on the one which our waking self is totally ignorant. But sometimes they have no such bearing and are purely records of other organized systems of consciousness independent of our physical existence. The subconscious dreams constitute the bulk of our most ordinary sleep experience, and they are those which we usually remember. But sometimes the subliminal builder is able to impress upon our sleep consciousness sufficiently to stamp its activities on our waking memory. If we develop our inner being, live more inwardly than most men do, then the balance change and a larger dream consciousness opens before us. Our dreams can take on a subliminal and no longer a subconscious character and can assume a reality and significance. It is even possible to become wholly conscious in sleep and follow throughout from beginning to end or over large stretches the stages of our dream experience. It is found that when we are aware of ourselves passing from the state of consciousness to a brief period of luminous and peaceful dreamless stress, which is the true restorer of the energies of the waking nature, and then returning by the same way to the waking consciousness, it is normal as we thus pass from state to state to let the previous or those nearest to the waking surface or remember. But this can be remedied. A greater retention is possible, or the power can be developed of going back in memory from dream to dream, from state to state, till the whole is once more before us. A coherent knowledge of sleep life though difficult to achieve or to keep established as possible. Our subliminal self is not, like our physical being, an outcome of the energy of the inconscient. It is a meeting place of the consciousness that emerges from below by evolution, or the consciousness that has descended from above for evolution. There is in it an inner mind, an inner vital being of ourselves, an inner or subtle physical being larger than our outer being and nature. This inner existence is the concealed origin of almost all our in our surface self. That is not a construction of the first inconscient world energy or a natural developed functioning of our surface consciousness or a reaction of it to impacts from the outside universal nature. And even in this construction, this functionings, this reaction, the subliminal takes part and exercises on them a considerable influence. That is here a there is area consciousness which has a power of direct contact with the universe, unlike the most indirect contact which our surface being maintains with the universe, though through the sense mind and the senses. There are yes, inner senses, subliminal sight, touch, hearing, but the subsenses or rather channels of the inner being, the direct consciousness of things than its informants. The subliminal is not dependent on its senses for its knowledge. They only give a form of its direct experience of object. They do not so much as in the waking mind convey forms of objects for the mind's documentation or as a starting point or a basis for an indirect constructive experience. The subliminal has the right of entry to the mental and vital and subtle physical planes of the universal consciousness. It is not confined to the material plane of the physical world. It possesses means of communication, the worlds of being with which the descent towards the evolution created in its passage and with all corresponding planes or worlds that may have been arisen or been constructed to serve the purpose of the re-ascent from unconscious to superconscious. It is into this large realm of interior existence that our mind and well-being retire, while they withdraw from the surface activities, whether by sleep or by inward or concentration or by inner plunge or trance. Our waking state is unaware of its connection with the subliminal being, although it receives from it, but without any knowledge of the place of the origin, inspirations, intuitions, ideas, will suggestions, sensations, urges to action that rise from below or from behind our limited surface existence. Sleep like trance opens the gate of the subliminal to us, for in sleep, as in trance, we retire behind the veil of the limited waking personality, and it is behind this veil that the subliminal has its existence. But we receive the records of a sleep experience through dream and in dream figures, are not in that condition which might be called an inner waking, and which is the most accessible form of the trance state, nor through the supernormal clarities of vision and other luminous and concrete ways of communication developed by the inner subliminal cognition when it gets into the a habitual or occasional conscious connection with our waking self. The subliminal with the subconscious as an annexity of itself, or the subconscious is also part of the behind the veil entity, is a sphere of inner things and of supraphysical experience. The surface subconscious is only a transcriber. It is for this reason that the Upanishad describes the subliminal being as the dream self, because it's normally in dreams, visions, observed states of inner experience that we enter into and are part of its experiences, just as it describes the superconscious as a sleep self, or because normally all mental or sensory experiences when we enter this superconscious. For in the deepest trance into which the touch of the superconscious plunges our mentality, no record from it or transcript of its contents can normally reach us. It is only by a special or an unusual development in a supernormal condition or through a break or rift in our confined normality that we can on the surface consciousness or contacts or messages of the superconscious. But in spite of this figurative names of dream state and sleep state, the field of both the states of consciousness was clearly regarded as the field of reality, no less than the waking state in which our movements of perceptive consciousness are recorded as a transcript of physical things and of our contacts with the physical universe. No doubt, all the three states can be classed as parts of an illusion. Our experiences of them can be ranked together as construction of an illusory consciousness. Our waking state no less illusory than our dream state or sleep state. Since the only truth or real reality is the incommunicable self or one existence, Atman Advaita, which is the first state of the self described by the Vedanta, but it is equally possible to regard and rank them together as three different orders of one reality or as three states of consciousness in which it is embodied our contact with three different grades of self-experience and world experience. If this is a true account of dream experience, dreams can no longer be classed as a mere unreal figure of unreal things temporarily imposed upon our self-consciousness as a reality. The analogy therefore fails even as a illustrative support for the theory of the cosmic illusion. It may be said, however, that our dreams are not themselves realities, but only a transcript of reality, a system of symbol images and our waking experience of the non-existent unreal figures of things on the bare, ever-present soul reality of the Brahman. But then, we note that in each case, the hallucination, the false image is not of something quite non-existent. It is an image of something existent, real, but not present in the place on which it has been imposed by the mind's error or by a sense error. A marriage is the image of a city or an oasis, running water, or of other absent things, and if this thing did not exist, the false image of them, whether raised up by the mind or reflected in the a deserter would not be there to delude the mind with a false sense of reality. A snake exists when and its existence and form are known to the victim of the momentary hallucination. If it had not been so, the delusion would not have been activated, for it is a form resemblance of the seen reality to another reality previously known elsewhere. That is the origin of the error. The analogy therefore is unhelpful. It would be valid only if our image of the universe were a falsity reflecting a true universe which is not here but elsewhere, or else if it were a false image manifestation of reality replacing in the mind or covering with this distorted resemblance a true manifestation. But here the world is a non-existent form of things, an illusory construction imposed on a bare reality, on the sole existence which is forever empty of things and formless. There would be a true analogy only for vision constructed in the void air of the desert, a figure of things that exist nowhere, or else if it imposed on a bare ground both rape and snake and other figures that equally existed nowhere. It is clear that in this analogy, two different kinds of illusion not illustrative of each other are mistakenly put together as if they were identical in nature. All mental or sense hallucination or really misrepresentation or misplacements or impossible combinations of false developments of things that are in themselves existence or possible or in some way within or allied to the province of the real. All mental errors and illusions are the result of an ignorance which miscombines miscombines its data or proceeds falsely upon a previous or present or possible content of knowledge. But the cosmic illusion has no basis of actuality. It is an original and an all original originating illusion. It imposes names, figures, happenings that are pure inventions on a reality in which that never were and never will be any happenings, names or figures. The analogy of mental annustation would be only applicable if we admit a Brahman without names, forms or relations and a world of names, forms and relations as equal realities imposed on one upon the other, the rope in the place of a snake or the snake in the place of the rope. An attribution it might be the activities of the Saguna to the coessence of the Nirguna. But if both are real, both must be the either separate aspects of the reality or coordinate aspects, positive or negative poles of the one existence. Any error or confusion of mind between them would not be a creative cosmic illusion, but only a wrong perception of reality, is a wrong relation caused by the ignorance. If we scrutinize other illustrations or analogies that are offered to us for a better understanding of the operation of Maya, we detect in all of them an inapplicability that deprives them of their force and value. The familiar instance of mother of pearl and silver turns also like the rope and snake analogy upon an error due to a resemblance between a present real and another an absent real. It can have no application to the imposition of a multiple and mutable unreality upon a sole and unique immutable real. In the example of an optical illusion, duplicating or multiplying a single object, as when we see two moons instead of one, there are two or more identical forms of the one object, one real, one or the rest an illusion. This does not illustrate the juxtaposition of the world and Brahman. For in the operation of Maya, there is much more complex phenomenon. There is indeed an illusory multiplication of the identical imposed upon its one and ever unalterable identity. The one appearing as many, but upon that is imposed an immense organized diversity in nature, a diversity of forms and movements which have nothing to do with the original real. Dreams, visions, the imaginations of the artist or poet can present such an organized diversity which is not real, but it is an imitation, a mimesis of real and already existent organized diversity, or it starts from such a mimesis, and even in the richest variation or wildest inventions, a mimetic element is observable. There is here no such thing as operation attributed to Maya, in which there is no mimesis, but a pure and radically original creation of unreal forms and movements. That are non-existence and non-existent anywhere and neither imitate nor reflect nor alter and develop anything discoverable in the reality. There's nothing in the operation of mind illusion that throws light upon this mystery. It is as a stupendous cosmic illusion of this kind must be. Sui generis, without parallel. What we see in this universe is that a diversity of the identical is everywhere, the fundamental operation of cosmic nature, but here it presents itself not as an illusion, but as a various real formation out of one original substance. The reality of oneness manifesting itself in a reality of numberless forms and powers of its being in what we confront everywhere. There's no doubt in its process a mystery, even a magic, but there is nothing to show that it's a magic of the unreal and not a working of a consciousness and force of being in the omnipotent real. A self-creation operated by an eternal self-knowledge. This at once raises the question of the nature of the mind, the parent of this illusion, and its relation to the original existence. Is mind the child and instrument of an original illusion, or is it itself a primal miscreating force or consciousness, or is it the mental ignorance and misprision of the truths of existence, a deviation from an original truth consciousness which is the real world builder? Our own mind at any rate is not an original and primary creative power of consciousness. It is, and all mind the same character must be, a derivative and instrumental demiurge, an intermediate creator. It's likely then that the analogies from the errors of mind, which are the outcome of an intermediate ignorance, may not truly illustrate the nature of nature or action of an original creative evolution or an all inventing and all constructing Maya. Our mind stands between superconscious and inconscious and results from both these opposite powers. It stands between an occult subliminal existence and outward cosmic phenomena. It receives inspirations, intuitions, imagination, impressions to knowledge, impulsions to knowledge and action, figures of subjective realities or possibilities from the unknown inner source. It receives the figures of unrealized actualities and the suggestions or further possibility from the observed cosmic phenomenon. What it receives are truths essential, possible or actual. It draws from the realized actualities of the physical universe and it brings out from them in its subjective action the unrealized possibilities which they contain or suggest or to which it can arrive by proceeding from them as starting point. It selects some of out of these possibilities for the subjective action and plays with imagined or inwardly constructed forms of them. It chooses others for objectivization and attempts to realize them, but it receives inspirations also from above and within, from invisible sources, and not only from the impacts of the visible cosmic phenomena. It sees truths other than those suggested by the actual physicality around it, and here too it plays subjectively with the transmitted or constructed forms of these truths, or it selects for objectivization and attempts to realize. Our mind is an observer and user of actualities, a diviner or recipient of truths, not yet known or actualized, a dealer on possibilities that mediate between the truth and actuality, but it is not the omniscience of an indefinite, infinite consciousness. It is limited in knowledge and has to sublimate its restricted knowledge by imagination and discovery. It does not, like the infinite consciousness, manifest the known. It has to discover the unknown. It seizes the possibilities of the infinite, not as results or variations or forms of a latent truth, but as constructions or creations, figments of its own boundless imagination. It is not the omnipotence of an infinite conscious energy. It can only realize or actualize what the cosmic energy will accept from it, or what it has the strength or to improve, impose, or introduce into the sum of things, because the secret divinity, superconscious, or subliminal, which uses its intents that should be expressed in nature. Its limitation of knowledge constitutes by incompleteness, but also by openness to error and ignorance. In dealing with actualities, it must misobserve, misuse, miscreate. In dealing with possibilities, it may miscompose, miscombine, misapply, misplace. In its dealing with the truths revealed in it may deform, misrepresent, disharmonize. It may also make constructions of its own which have no correspondence with the things of actual existence, no potentiality of realization, no support from the truth behind them. But still, these constructions start from an illegitimate extension of actualities, catch at unpermitted possibilities, or turn truth to an application which is not applicable. Mind creates. Mind creates, but it's not an original creator, not omniscient or omnipotent, but is efficient damage. Maya, the elusive power, on the contrary, must be an original creator, for it creates all things out of nothing, unless we suppose that it creates out of the substance of the reality. But then the things it creates must be in some way real. It has a perfect knowledge of what it wishes to create, a perfect power to create whatever it chooses, omniscient or omnipotent, though only over its own illusions, harmonizing them and linking them together with a magical sureness and sovereign energy, absolutely effective in imposing its own formations of figments past of as truths, possibilities, actualities on the creature intelligence. Our mind works best and with a firm confidence when it is given a substance to work on, or at least use as a basis for its operations, or when it can handle a cosmic force of which it has acquired the knowledge. It is sure if of its steps when it has to deal with actualities. This rule of dealing with objectivized or discovered actualities and proceeding from them for creation is the reason for our enormous success of physical science. But here there is evidently no creation of illusions, no creation of non-existence in vacuum, and turning them into apparent actualities such as is attributed to the cosmic illusion. For mind can only create out of substance what is possible to the substance. It can only do with the force of nature what is in accordance with the realizable energies. It can only invent or discover what is already contained in the truth and potentiality of nature. On the other side, it receives inspiration for creation from within itself or from above. But this can only take form if they are the truths or potentials, but not by the mind's own right or invention. For if the mind erects what is neither true nor potential, that cannot be created, cannot become an actual in nature. Maya, on the contrary, if it creates on the base of reality, yet erects a superstructure which has nothing to do with the reality, is not true or potential in it. If it creates out of substance of the reality, it makes out of it things that are not possible to it or in accordance with it. For it creates forms of reality is supposed to be a formless, incapable of form. It creates determinations and the reality is supposed to be absolutely indeterminable. But our mind has the faculty of imagination. It can create and take as true and real its own mental structures. Here, it might be thought is something analogous to the action of Maya. Our mental image is an instrument of ignorance. It is the resort or device of or refuge of a limited capacity of knowledge, a limited capacity of effective action. Our mind supplements its deficiencies by its power of imagination. It uses it to extract from things obvious and visible the things that are not obvious and visible. It undertakes to create its own figures of the possible and impossible. It erects illusory actuals or draws figures of a conjectured or constructed truth of things that are not true or to outer experiences. That is at least the appearance of its operation, but in reality, it's the mind's way or one of its way of summoning out of the being its infinite possibilities, even of discovering or capturing the unknown possibilities of the infinite. But because it cannot do this with knowledge, it makes experimental construction of truth and possibility and yet a unrealized actuality. As its power of receiving inspirations of truth is limited, it imagines, hypotheses, questions whether this or that may not be truths. Or as its force to summon real potentials is narrow and restricted. It erects possibilities which it hopes to actualize or wishes it could actualize. As its power to actualize is trampled and confined by the material world's oppositions. It figures subject to actualization to satisfy its will of creation and delight of self-representation. But it is to be noted that through the imagination, it does receive a figure of truth. It does summon possibilities which are afterwards realized. Does often by its imagination exercise an effective pressure on the world's actualities. Imaginations that persist in the human mind, like the idea of travel in the air, and often by self-fulfillment. Individual thought formations can actualize themselves if there is sufficient strength in the formation or in the mind that forms it. Imaginations can create their own potentiality, especially if they are supported in the collective mind, and may in the long run draw on themselves the sanction of the cosmic will. In fact, all imaginations represent possibilities. Some are able one day to actualize in some form, perhaps a very different form of actuality. More are condemned to sterility because they entered into the figure or some schema of the present creation, do not come within the permitted potential of the individual, or do not accord with the collective or the generic principle, or are alien to the nature or destiny of the containing world existence. Thus, the mind's imagination is not purely and radically illusory. They proceed on the basis of its experience of actualities, or at least set out from that, or variations upon actuality, or they figure the maybe or might be of the infinite. What could be if other truths are manifested, if existing potentialities had been otherwise arranged, or other possibilities than those already admitted become potential. Moreover, through this faculty, forms and powers of other domains than that of the physical actuality communicate with our mental being. Even when the imaginations are extravagant or take the form of hallucination or illusion, they proceed with the actuals or possibles for the basis. The mind creates a figure of a mermaid, but the fantasy is composed of two actualities put together in a way that is outside its normal potentiality. Angels, griffins, chimera are constructed on the same principle. Sometimes the imagination is a memory of former actualities, as in the mythical figure of the dragon. Sometimes it is a figure of a happening that is real or could be real at the other planes or in other conditions of existence. Even the illusions of the maniac are founded on an extravagant misfitting of actuals, or when the lunatic combines himself kingship and England and sits an imagination on the throne of the Plantagenets and Tudors. Again, when we look into the origin of the mental error, we find normally that it is miscombination, misplacement, misuse, misunderstanding, or misapplication of the elements of experience and knowledge. Imagination itself is in its nature a substitute for a truer consciousness, faculty of institutions of possibility. As the mind ascends toward the truth consciousness, its mental power becomes a truth imagination, which brings the color and light of the lighter higher truths into the limited adequacy or inadequacy of the knowledge already achieved and formulated, and finally, in the transforming light above, it gives place only to the higher truth powers, or itself turns into intuition and inspiration. The mind in that uplifting ceases to be a creator or delusions and architect of error. Our mind then is not a sovereign creator of things non-existent or erected in a void. It is the ignorance trying to know its very illusions start from the basis of some kind of that and are the results of limited knowledge of ignorance. A mind is an instrument of the cosmic ignorance, but it does not seem to be or does not act like a power or an instrument of a cosmic illusion. It is a seeker and discoverer of a creator, or would be a creator of truths, possibilities and actualities. It would be rational to suppose that the original consciousness and power from which mind must be derivation is also a creator of truths, possibilities and actualities, not limited like mind, but cosmic in its scope, not open to error, because free from all ignorance, a sovereign instrument or a self-power of supreme omniscience, omnipotence, and eternal wisdom and knowledge. This then is the dual possibility that arises before us. Therein we may suppose an original consciousness and power, creative illusions and realities with mind as its instrument or medium in the human and animal consciousness, so that the differentiated universe we see is unreal, a fiction of Maya, and only some indeterminable and undifferentiated observed is real. Or That is, may I equally suppose an original is supreme or cosmic truth consciousness, purity of a true universe, but with minds acting in that universe as imperfect consciousness, ignorant, partly knowing, partly not knowing, a consciousness which is by its ignorance or limitation of knowledge, capable of error, misrepresentation, mistaken, or misdirected development from the known of uncertain groupings towards the unknown of partial creations and buildings, a constant opposition between truth and error, knowledge and these lines. But this ignorance, in fact, proceeds, however, stumblingly upon knowledge and towards knowledge. It is inherently capable of shedding the limitation, the mixture, and can turn by that liberation into the truth consciousness, into power of the original knowledge. Our inquiry is so far led rather in the second direction. It points towards the conclusion that the nature of our consciousness is not of a character that would justify the hypothesis of a cosmic illusion as a solution of its problem. A problem exists, but it consists in the mixture of the knowledge with ignorance in our cognition of self and things, and it is the version of this imperfection that we have to discover. There is no need of bringing in the original power of illusion, always mysteriously existent in the eternal reality, or else intervening and imposing a world of non-existent forms on a consciousness or superconscious that is forever pure, eternal, and absolute.